Hello and welcome. I'm Monica Vnisky, Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the High. Thank you for joining us for this talk on the High's current exhibition, Bestowing Beauty, Masterpieces from Persian Lands. Bestowing Beauty is organized by the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. This exhibition is made possible by Premier Exhibition Series sponsor Delta Airlines, Exhibition Series sponsor Northside Hospital, Premier Exhibition Series supporters the Antinori Foundation, Sarah and Jim Kennedy, and Wish Foundation, Benefactor Exhibition Series supporters Ann Cox Chambers Foundation and Hilton and Robin Howell, Ambassador Exhibition Series supporter, Contributing Exhibition Series supporters, and our other generous supporters. Before we begin, I would like to thank the High Museum donors and members. Your support is invaluable and fuels our mission. If you are not yet a member of the museum or need to renew, please visit high.org at the end of this program. And now to welcome our esteemed guest, Aimee Froom. Dr. Aimee Froom is Curator of the Art of the Islamic Worlds at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. Formerly Hagup Kevorkian Associate Curator of Islamic Art at the Brooklyn Museum, Dr. Froom has over 20 years of curatorial and teaching experience, having consulted for museums including the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, the British Museum in London, and the Réunion des Musées Nationaux in Paris, and having taught undergraduate and graduate courses at Brown University, the Bard Graduate Center, Trinity College, American University of Paris, and the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. She earned a BA from Brown University, an MA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and a PhD from New York University. Her most recent book publications include Arts of Islamic Lands, selection from the Al-Saba Collection, Kuwait, The Legacy of Persian Art, and of course, Bestowing Beauty, Masterpieces from Persian Lands, which has won 2 book awards. Dr. Froom is also a 2020 Fellow at the Center for Curatorial Leadership. I encourage you to visit the High and see Bestowing Beauty, Masterpieces from Persian Lands in person, which runs now through April 18th, 2021. And without further ado, please enjoy hearing from Aimee. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I am delighted to share Bestowing Beauty, Masterpieces from Persian Lands with the High Museum's audience. I would like to thank Director Rand Suffolk for his vision. You, Monica, Curator of Decorative Arts and Design, for your enthusiasm to organizing an exhibition outside of your specialty. It has been a delight to work with the entire High Museum team. Mounting exhibitions during a pandemic is really uncharted territory for us all, and I have been impressed by the consummate professionalism of the entire team. Here in Houston, we just opened our newest exhibition, Between Sea and Sky, Blue and White Ceramics from Persia and Beyond. These images are from our installation. If you're traveling, I welcome you to come see our exhibition and also our newest major building on our campus, the Kinder Building for Modern and Contemporary. I'll just mention that here in Houston, our Islamic art collection is over a decade old. It is a locally grown initiative supported enthusiastically by Houstonians. We've built our Islamic art collection and programming. Here's some gallery shots, East and West galleries. Thanks to Director Gary Tintero and Director Peter Marzio before him, as well as our dynamic and dedicated supporters. We also have a unique relationship with the Al-Saba collection of Kuwait, which allows us a more encyclopedic display of Islamic art. We've got some 300 objects in 13 centuries of Islamic art on view in 4 permanent galleries in Houston. So I encourage you to come visit us, see Between Sea and Sky, and experience our new Kinder Building for Modern and Contemporary Art. Today, we are celebrating the opening of Bestowing Beauty, Masterpieces from Persian Lands at the High Museum. This collection has been this collection that's on view has been carefully assembled over the last 50 years by Mr. Hossein Afshar, a very astute collector with a brilliant eye for quality. This collection reflects one man's lifelong pursuit and passion. His dedication to preserving the artistic heritage of Iran for future generations and to celebrating the extraordinary beauty that Persian art bestows on its beholders. Among the treasures in this collection that spans centuries, from the eve before the Islamic period in the 6th century to the end of the 19th century, are exquisite miniature paintings, rare Quran pages, an impressive ceramics, precious inlaid metalwares, sumptuous silk brocades, and monumental silk carpets. When reflecting on how to organize the exhibition, I was struck by a number of common experiences and emotions evoked by these artworks that are shared by peoples of all cultures. Gathering together these ideas, some universal themes emerged, and they became the main themes of the exhibition. Faith and piety, art of the word, love and longing, kingship and authority, battles and banquets, and earth and nature. The visual and literary arts in Iran have held a very privileged place in Iranian civilization for centuries. They have reflected and helped define a strong sense of cultural identity that has persisted even during times of invasions. Located at the critical crossroads of trade routes and migrations, Iranian lands historically have weathered both small and major invasions, including the war waged by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE, the Arab Muslim conquest and the advent of Islam in the 7th and 8th centuries, and the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. All of these events have influenced Persian cultural heritage as Iranians assimilated into their own traditions, their conquerors' respective political, military, social, and economic systems. I think it can be argued that there was a certain degree of reciprocity within these encounters, and that many of these systems were, to varying degrees, Persianized. The result was an even richer and more nuanced culture, and subsequent artistic traditions reflected these cross-cultural exchanges. After the arrival of Islam to Persian lands, the Quran, which contains God's revelations to the Prophet Muhammad, became a primary symbol of faith. This brings us to our first theme, faith and piety. Copying the word of God was and continues to be a sign of piety and indeed the highest form of Islamic art. Exquisitely penned and sumptuously illuminated Quran manuscripts were produced across Islamic lands. This Quran folio from the 10th century on parchment, not paper, is from one of the very few early Qurans with only 3 lines on a page. With so little text on each page, the complete manuscript would have numbered over 1,200 folios, and it would have been divided into several volumes. The Kufic script in Arabic used here is highly distinctive for its extreme elongation of letters above the baseline and sweeping crescent finials of other letters. So the primary role of calligraphy in transmitting the word of God is paramount. But calligraphers also copied a variety of texts in addition to the Quran, including sacred texts such as sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and secular texts like literary manuscripts and poetry. One particularly elegant example is a single page penned in Nastaliq script by Muhammad Hussein al-Khatib, the favored calligrapher of the Mughal Emperor Akbar, which includes a beautiful name of God in Arabic, He is the Restorer, Al-Mu'id, and poetry verses in Persian by the 15th century Persian poet Amir Shahi, including the following. Shahi, if lofty fortune takes the trouble to come again, the beloved will suddenly come through the door again. In the presence of your face, who would talk of jasmine? In the presence of the lane where you live, who would talk of the lawn of the garden? Single pages featuring couplets of poetry copied and signed by master calligraphers were valuable currency. They were collected and gathered into deluxe albums along with exquisite drawings and miniature paintings for the delight and appreciation of erudite collectors. Often, the calligraphy samples were embellished with depictions of flowers and birds. The Mughal emperors of India encouraged the naturalistic depiction of flora and fauna. Birds decorate this page, and one bird in particular, which is the second from the top on the left, right here, may be a golden pheasant. Indigenous to China and highly prized, it would have arrived in India by way of trade or as a diplomatic gift. And I would like to thank my colleague, Chris Holmes, who is Assistant Curator of Birds here at the Houston Zoo, for his help identifying this bird and many others you'll see in the exhibition. The Houston Zoo actually has the 4th largest collection of birds in the US, and Chris is really a treasure trove of information. So a range of calligraphic scripts was developed over the centuries, enhancing the aesthetic form and rhythmic beauty of calligraphy, or beautiful writing. Calligraphers enjoyed the highest status among all artists. This is reflected in the careful adornment of their tools, including the lacquer pen cases we'll see later. The art of the word expanded well beyond the page. As you'll see, words were engraved onto metalwork, carved into wood, and painted onto ceramics and enamels. A steel beggar's bowl, or kashkul, has inscribed Persian verses that read in part, "Such a steel begging bowl as this one, which is full of is worthy of the Khakan, or ruler, of Iran, and is the ornament in Caesar's crown. The kings of the world are the customers for this dervish's cup." Beggars' bowls, also called kashkul, or alms bowls, are one of the most recognizable attributes of a Sufi. The kashkul reflects the ascetic lifestyle of Sufi mystics. Almsgiving is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and many ascetics were able to survive on the generosity of others. Kashkul originally were carved from the nut of a coco de mer tree, or, like you see here, were created to mimic its shape. This tree grows on the Seychelles Islands, and its nuts float to the Iranian shore after a long maturation period. This process became a popular metaphor for the journey of Sufi mystics towards spiritual knowledge. Sufism is an inner mystical dimension of Islam dedicated to the relationship between the human and the divine. Sufis devote their entire lives to ascending a spiritual path towards union with God. Manuscript paintings tell the tales of legendary kings traversing mountains to seek the wise counsel of dervishes or ascetic Sufis. This dervish is deep in thought. His contemplative state is aided by the wine in his hand. In Sufi poetry, a drunken dervish is someone intoxicated with the love of God. The roses in the foreground are a metaphor for the divine beloved and a reminder of the dervish's quest for union with God. This brings us to our next theme, love and longing. Love and longing are among the most celebrated leitmotifs in art and literature around the world. In Persian literature, literary and artistic manifestations, love finds expression as a profound human connection and as a metaphor for one's yearning for unity with the divine. The quest for divine love, knowledge, and union are part of Sufism. Sufis devote their lives to following a spiritual path of union with God. Generations of artists, poets, dancers, and musicians have been inspired by Sufism. Mystical verses engraved on brass torch stands allude to the love as a flame that consumes all but God, the ultimate beloved. So this 16th century brass torch stand features Persian verses including, "Like a candle, our heads are alight through burning desire for you." This aligns with a common spiritual metaphor employed by Sufis to express the longing of the human soul to be reunited with God. One of the most familiar tropes in Persian visual and textual imagery is that of the rose and the nightingale, Gul Bubul. This appears in epic romances and lyric and mystical poetry stretching back nearly 1,000 years. The longing and devotion of the nightingale for the beloved rose is a reminder of the fleeting nature of earthly beauty, as well as of love's vanity and cruelty. It can also be interpreted as the soul's desire to be one with God. So earthly images of love and longing in the exhibition include a pair of tightly embracing lovers on a slim lacquer pen case. The message of desire is enhanced by the Europeanizing style, which is visible in the portrait medallions, architecture, and landscapes you see here. This style found great favor in the 17th century. To the contemporary 17th century viewer, these foreign European elements also represented temptation and desire. With the influx of European portraits, Persian painters explored new interpretations of ideal beauty and blended them with Persian notions, as embodied in The European Lady by Ali Kuli Jabadar, a Persian artist of Georgian or Albanian origin. The model for this painting is Autumn from the series The Four Seasons, published by the engraver Peter Aubry the Younger in Strasbourg, 1621 to 1669. So the wine that you see here does not allude to a grape harvest, but instead recalls the cupbearer or Saki. And the lone huntsman below may allude to the lover or human searching to reunite with his beloved or God. The artist has cleverly transformed the context here, creating a culturally nuanced, visually compelling expression of ideal beauty. During the Qajar period, especially in the 19th century, near life-size oil paintings of female musicians and dancers adorned with pearls, jewels, and Kashmiri shawls may have hung on the walls of palace banquet halls. This woman performs the role of the cupbearer, or Saki. She embodies the ideal beauty of Persian literature. She's as slender as a cypress with a moon-shaped face, a rosebud mouth, and languid, narcissus-like eyes framed by crescent-shaped eyebrows. The most iconic sign of a Qajar beauty is the uninterrupted eyebrow framing the eyes. Beauties like this female tumbler entertained royal guests at lavish banquets. This acrobatic dancer is performing a move called the umbrella, or chhatra. Her portrait would have been set in the upper niches of banquet halls, providing yet another layer of spectacle. So banquets and battles, Bazm and Razm, our next theme, are quintessential aspects of Persian kingship and figure prominently in Persian art and literature. In the Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, the national epic penned by Ferdowsi about the year 1000, pre-Islamic kings feast with their families and allies and fight valiantly against their foes. Depictions of celebratory banquets and imperial ceremonies marked battle victories, diplomatic receptions, royal family events, and annual holidays like Nowruz, the Persian New Year. And these fill the pages of royal workshop manuscript illustrations throughout the history of Persian painting. To give you an idea of the extraordinary banquet settings, we've included some opulent textiles, like this embroidered red velvet panel, which may have been a summer carpet or a precious covering for a throne platform. Lavish feasts were presented in appropriately ornate serving dishes and vessels, including engraved wine jugs, cups, and Chinese-inspired blue and white dishes. This mashrabe, or jug, was used for drinking as opposed to pouring wine. Elaborately decorated lidded food containers boast calligraphed inscriptions that wax poetic about feasting. The Persian inscriptions around the body and on the lid of this container praise its beauty, declaring it a priceless treasure worthy for the feast of a nobleman. In the 17th century, tin copper was used instead of brass. This container is especially rare for the survival of its lid, which is referred to in the body text. On top of this bowl is a cover distinguished with marks, like the cover of the sky above the world. Its engraving and design are from the font of elegance. Together, they are beautiful, like the Chinese blossom and the arabesque. One can imagine the fragrant dishes served from this container in a palace, decorated with magnificent carpets woven with silk and gold and silver metallic threads like this one. Carpets like this were so precious to the Safavid Shahs of the 17th century and later as well to European royalty. This particular carpet was once owned by King Umberto II of Italy. Feasting took place in palaces and in outdoor gardens as well, as seen on a pair of lacquer book covers which go beyond their protective function to shelter a precious manuscript. These book covers are meticulously painted by the master artist Akamirak. On the right, a prince and his courtiers enjoy a banquet in a lush garden setting. This scene of princely pleasure is complemented by another on the left depicting horsemen in pursuit of game. Hunting and warfare allowed princes and courtiers to display their equestrian skills, and hunting often served as a metaphor for the military might and kingship. This is seen throughout Islamic lands. Here are a couple of details. Furusiyya is an ancient Arabic tradition rooted in faras, or horse, and ranges from the art of war and equestrian sports to general games requiring concentration, skill, and morality, all values ascribed to horses as well. The princely figure, attired in a sumptuous fur-trimmed coat of gold brocade that you see here, noble out hunting, seems less concerned by military might than by making a fashion statement astride his steed. The hooded falcon perched on his gloved hand can be interpreted as a sign of royalty. So images of kingship and the kingly ideal are important to Persian literary and visual culture and figure prominently in illustrated manuscripts of the Shahnameh since the 14th century. Kingly virtues are revealed through the actions of ancient rulers and warriors. In this 14th century Shirazi copy, we see King Khosrow with his wife Ferongis and paladin Giv holding a council of war and crossing the river Oxus. The verses immediately preceding and next to the first painting come from Giv's address to Khosrow. The river will give you passage, you who has glory and stature and would adorn a throne. Below, Khosrow bravely breaks the torrent and leads his cavalry across the river. Kingly virtues are also revealed through manuals on morals and manners, as illustrated in this painting of a cruel schoolteacher treating his students with excessive harshness. From one of the most influential works of Persian literature, the Gulistan, or Rose Garden, of Sadi, which advises kings on morals and manners, the text above the painting in Persian reads, "A group of innocent boys suffered at the hand of his tyranny, daring neither to laugh nor to speak. He would slap the rose-colored cheeks of some and rack the crystalline legs of others." The teacher is eventually replaced by a milder man, of whose meekness the children take full advantage. The tale ends with the words of a wise old man extolling the importance of education. Better a master's cruelty than a father's affection. So this painting is discreetly signed on a ceramic storage jar, which I have a little detail of, by one of the most celebrated painters and illuminators, Mahmud Musahib. The classical hero, Alexander the Great, is treated as an Iranian hero and king known as Iskandar, the son of the Iranian king Darab. He inherited the Greek part of the empire and his half-brother, Dara, ruled over Iran. This page is from the Sharafnameh, the Book of Honor portion of Nizami's Khamsa, and it covers Iskandar's world conquest. After a campaign in Egypt, Iskandar stops paying tribute to Dara and he invades Iran. The half-brothers meet in battle, but Dara is slain by treacherous officers. As Dara dies, the two are reconciled. The text immediately before the image reads, "He laid his, or Dara's, tired head on his thigh. He placed the dark night, Dara, on the shining day, Iskandar." The image of the classical hero warrior of Persian literature continued alongside a new image of authority which developed in the late 17th century and was influenced by royal portraits of European and Mughal rulers. Royal Persian portraits reached an apex in the 19th century under the Qajars. Persian court painters created individualized portraits of contemporary kings, princes, and members of the ruling elite, capturing the political agendas, personalities, and image of power that their patrons sought to embody. This portrait of Nasr ad-Din Shah, the ruler of the Qajar dynasty, projects a powerful presence. The Shah, who acceded to the throne at age 17, wears a European-style military uniform. He is flanked by his first prime minister, Amir Kabir, you can see him on the left here, and army representatives. Half of the king's body is grounded in the physical world, while half is in the golden sky, affirming both earthly and divine authority. A keen painter, photographer, and art patron, Nasr ad-Din Shah collaborated with court painters to really craft his image. So this portrait of the young ruler marks the beginning of a prolific creative period of royal portraiture. Nasr ad-Din Shah's predecessor and father, Muhammad Shah, who ruled from 1834 to 1848, wears a Persian robe in this rare early portrait medallion. Rather than the European-style military uniform, he instituted as formal court attire in the 1840s. So we think the box is from slightly earlier production. Royal portrait medallions were awarded as honorary decorations, a custom derived from diplomatic exchanges of portrait miniatures among France, Russia, and Ottoman Turkey. The engraved gold and polychrome box here resembles European snuff boxes of the 17th and 18th centuries. The inscriptions read in part, "The portrait of Muhammad Shah is the splendor of the sun." In 1848, the royal portrait was formally instituted by Nasr ad-Din Shah as the highest class of the Order of the Lion and the Sun. So from depictions of the heroic warrior in classical literature to carefully crafted portraits of powerfully individualized sovereigns, the image of rule evolved and retained its paramount position in Persian culture. Finally, the theme of nature and images drawn from the natural world form a significant corpus within Persian art. Manifestations of flora and fauna abound in a variety of media as diverse as precious metalwork, as you see here, lacquer pen cases, and other works. Popular motifs like the lion, the falcon, the rose and the nightingale, as we've seen, convey specific cultural meanings. Birds also figure prominently in Persian art and in the Hossein Afshar collection. Some birds, as we've seen, are so precisely depicted that they can be identified. Here again, I would like to acknowledge my dear colleague, Chris Holmes at the Houston Zoo. So this is a common green magpie. It's delicately depicted, and it is signed by the painter Ali Kuli and dated 1159, which is 1746 to 1747. Furthermore, it is graced with verses from Layla and Majnun, this section of Nizami's Khamsa, in the borders of this album page. The common green magpie is accurately rendered here with detailed treatment of its wing feathers. The shading and tonal gradations of the foliage also reflect the influence of European characteristics for naturalistic forms evident in Persian painting at this time. Iranians were one of the earliest peoples to cultivate gardens, perhaps due to the arid climate of their lands and a love for garden-like settings and the promise of spring and renewal that pervade Persian culture. So flowers, trees, and flowing waters evoke the ancient idea of the garden as a symbol of paradise. And actually, the English word paradise is derived from the ancient Persian term paradiesa. In the monotheistic traditions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the beauty of nature is a reminder of God as the giver of life, garden as an earthly representation of paradise. This magnificent carpet evokes both heavenly and earthly paradise of gardens and animals. It is really a masterpiece of Safavid weaving and design. It is based on two complex drawings that are turned and reflected so as to avoid straight lines along the repeats. And so in this way, the carpet gives the impression of infinity, which is also another notion of paradise. The Quran promises believers ripe and abundant fruits in a description of paradise as a garden. Depictions of ripe fruit came to represent the promise of paradise. Steel fruits embellished with ornamental patterns and gold became quite fashionable during the Qajar period in the 19th century. They present inherent contradictions between permanence and impermanence, fineness and the day-to-day. Through these contradictions, they evoke an idealized world, a garden of paradise filled with everlasting pleasures and luxuries beyond imagination. These exquisite decorative objects evoke an idealized vision of paradise while allowing their owners to have perpetually perfect fruit. So in conclusion, the centuries-old impulse to explore the themes of faith and piety, love and longing, kingship and authority, and earth and nature, this impulse has played a prominent role in Persian civilization. These themes find significant artistic expression in the Hossein Afshar collection. Because these themes transcend time and space and resonate across so many cultures, the extraordinary works in this collection speak to all of us on many levels, while also capturing and preserving the beauty and significance of the art and culture of Iranian lands. I hope that you visit the exhibition often. Please also pick up a copy of the catalog in the museum shop. I assembled a group of 11 scholars to bring together their expertise to this collection, and the result is a carefully researched, handsomely illustrated volume that would make a great holiday gift for anyone. So I thank you very much, and I wish you all happy holidays and a very happy New Year 2021. Thank you.